All right, so good evening to all of you and welcome to Upfront on JoyNews. So yesterday the Finance Minister was in Parliament to present to Parliament the coronavirus alleviation program that President Akufo-Addo directed him to present to Ghana's legislature. Now, in that particular plan, according to the Finance Minister, according to the government of Ghana, we're looking at spending some 1.2 billion Ghana cedis. 600 million Ghana cedis goes to small and medium enterprises to actually help them go through these times as they'll be hit by the implications of coronavirus. 280 million will be going to households. So 200 million would go into the provision of free water and sanitation. 40 million will go into providing hot meals for families, and then 40 million goes to the National Food Buffer Store Company to be able to procure more food and store should we get into more crisis, with 323 million Ghana cedis going to frontline health workers. But this evening our focus is on the package, and we're asking that simple question: is this enough? Can this help ameliorate the current plight of the vulnerable in the country? Would this be able to actually sustain the Ghanaian should the coronavirus move beyond the 14 days that we are currently experiencing a partial lockdown? And to help us get into all these details and have a better understanding of it is the director of the Institute of Social, Statistical and Economic Research, Professor Peter Quartey of the University of Ghana. We'll be getting into the details with him shortly, but after this short break. All right, so thank you very much for staying with us. And we have Professor Peter Quartey joining us again. So Professor Quartey, thank you very much for staying. And so we know that the World Bank is telling us that Africa is likely to go into recession and would need some $100 billion in order to come out of it. Help us understand first and foremost what the recession is all about and how it could impact the African economies, particularly the Ghanaian economy, Professor Quartey.
Particularly when it declines through conservative quarters. Now, what we see in that Japan and other developed countries have projected a recession. Now, should that happen, it means we will have repercussions because we live in a global economy. So should that happen, then that is likely to affect our context, likely to affect Ghana. Ghana is not immune from the coronavirus, and therefore we're also likely to have some declines in GDP. I think our finance minister has projected that we might grow around 2.6, 2.5%. Even if it's lingers on for a longer period, then we are likely to grow at 1.5%, and that can have severe repercussions on our economy.
So in effect, there is a possibility that the Ghanaian economy could go into a recession. Should we go into a recession, how would that impact the Ghanaian living around this time?
The growth for national output is like a cake. When it grows and you're sharing, then you get a bigger share. Everybody gets a bigger share, provided it is shared equally. But even at the moment, we have inequality around. You have the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. So when the cake shrinks or becomes smaller, then you are likely to see the rich recording declines in their share. You're very much likely to see the poor getting worse off than ever. So that could have repercussions on people's livelihood, could have repercussions on employment, the demand for goods and services, and so on and so forth.
So let's look at the inequality bit. So in effect, if we are not careful, we could have a widening inequality gap as a result of the recession that is likely to be faced in the country.
Certainly, we're certainly likely to have widening the inequality. Already, it is widening. As we grow, growth is not distributed evenly. So the rich are getting richer, and the poor, especially the bottom 20, are getting worse. And when this happens, then we are likely to see a worsening the inequality situation.
So let's look at in the global recession of 2007 to 2009, we saw the case of housing prices going down. That was more like a good news for some people. Should we go through a recession? Are there some benefits that individuals, particularly those within the middle to upper classes, could have in the country?
Yes, certainly. You know, housing is more or less like an investment. When you earn income, the basic necessities of life are the things you try to satisfy.
Okay.
So food, you satisfy your food requirements, and in Africa, it is estimated that about 80%, 70 to 80% of our income is spent on food. So you meet your food requirements, then shelter, your clothing, and if you have any excess money, then you try to either buy a house or put up a house. And therefore, when incomes go down, we are likely not to demand more houses. That is high. So that is likely to affect house prices, and house prices are likely to go down. But other sectors will record increases in prices. For instance, some of the commodities that we don't produce locally, or we produce but we are not self-sufficient. Something like rice, because we are not yet sufficient, and many other commodities, sugar, and many others. We are not self-sufficient, and therefore, in such times, prices of such commodities are likely to go up.
So let's look at this carefully. You talked about how in such times we could go through these challenges. What do we do to ensure that we don't get to these challenges? Let's take a critical look at the Corona Alleviation Program now, because it is what we've put in place to ensure that we ameliorate, some of the problems associated with coronavirus. If you look at it, does it look like one that could actually get us out of, or that would ensure that we don't get into a recession?
Find the Corona Alleviation Fund as a good initiative is a first step towards minimizing the effects of the COVID-19 on people, particularly the vulnerable and the excluded. But I don't think that will be sufficient. Let's also be clear. I don't think that is supposed to make people better off. It is just to keep body and soul together. And therefore, it might, to a large extent, help people, move people, stop people from starvation, assist people from committing suicide or going into all kinds of crime. But that will not make anybody better off. If you look at the amount of itself, I mean, government is already fiscal revenue, and therefore it is limited by how much it can spend. We have a very thin fiscal space, and that is a challenge. So I find that as a good step in the right direction. However, the vulnerable, aside will need shelter. They have to pay their rent. If you don't have a job, you cannot, because of the lockdown, you cannot go out there. Most of them are daily wage earners.
Okay.
As and when they go, that is when they earn income. And therefore, if you're in a lockdown situation, you don't step up, your rent might be a problem if the lockdown continues for a while.
So you talked about the fact that this is to put body and soul together. One of the things I really want to find out from you, you've just talked about the challenge we have when it comes to people having to go out and go and generate some income, and as and when they get money, then they'll be able to eat. Now we're looking at 40 million Ghana cedis for 400,000 people. Can this money actually help put body and soul together? Professor Peter Quartey, looking at how much it would cost you to have a good meal in times like these?
We are not in good times. We are in very uncertain times, and therefore some of these things are quick measures to help fix some of this problem. But as they are being implemented, I believe the rough edges will be smoothing. But then, if you look at the amount involved, I see the challenge government faces. On the first day, when they step out, they get a certain number. Then as the program continues, you see more people flooding to the areas where food is shared. So we don't actually have a grip on the numbers. And I believe we should take advantage of this and take some vital details about people so that we know exactly what the situation is. In some jurisdictions, when things like this happen, you see people going online to register unemployment benefits. At least there's some registration, so you have a rough idea of the numbers. This morning, listening to the Deputy Minister of Finance, I heard that there will be other sources of funding to support this program. So the amount allocated might not be the only one, but there will be other sources of funding. Perhaps even from the private sector, I've seen a lot of private sector support, which is quite encouraging. I'm quite impressed by that. And I also urge those managing those funds to be very prudent and accountable, so that the spirit to which this is being done will continue.
But since you've raised the Deputy Finance Minister's comment this morning, and so she talked about feeding 1 million people, Professor Peter Quartey, and if you're feeding 1 million people, she's talked about, and for you who understands these things very well, she's talked about how the usage of the contingency fund, and they're looking at actually feeding people 8 days. That in itself is worrying, because what we do know is that we're in a lockdown for 14 days. Professor Peter Quartey, if you plan to feed people for 8 days, how does that amount to being able to cater for these persons?
I think I also listening to the conversation, and what I gathered from that discussion or presentation was that the fund that has been allocated is going to cater for 8 days. There's going to be other sources of finance to complement what is being made available through this fund. But let's not forget, I mean, the amount involved, I haven't done the back of the envelope calculation of how much it will cost per person per day.
Well, if you, so I have done it. And let me just share it with you. So if we are to go by what the Deputy Minister said, you're looking at 1 million people. So 1 million and 40 million. So 40 million divided by 1 million, you have 40. 40 divided by 8, you have 5. Okay, so that's 5 cedis a day for a hot meal. Realistically, is this what we need? Can this really solve the problem? Can people just rely on 5 cedis a day? How many meals can they eat a day, Professor Quartey?
What I see or what I've heard so far is that a meal a day. I mean, I mentioned earlier, is to keep body and soul together, a meal a day. So most they take this early afternoon, But 5 cedis a day, I think if you're cooking for a good number of people, for large numbers, 5 cedis a day, having to benefit from economies of scale, will be quite a decent amount to feed, get one person a meal per day. I mean, the checks we see around town, I don't think they cost that much, and I think even those are private sources, people feeding or selling by the roadside. So I think if you are feeding large numbers, you benefit from economies of scale, and therefore 5 cedis a day would be quite a good, to keep body and soul together. Mind you, if you look at we have used to feed our children in the boarding facilities, you will be very much excited to see that this is quite a decent amount allocated to feeding. Ask yourself again, the school feeding program, how much is spent to feed the children? Prison officers, those in prison, how much do we spend a day feeding prisoners? So I think the 5 cedis a day, it could be better, but looking at the numbers can do a good job. Then also you find philanthropists, the churches, the mosques, and individuals also coming on board. That is great. So it's a good start, but as I said earlier, as we move along, we'll see the rough edges, and I believe government is a listening government, and our government would look at this where there are challenges, it will come in. What I expect to see in the process is registering people, at least getting some numbers.
Yes, we'll get to registering people. But before we come to registering people, I just want a bit of clarification here. So, yes, if you look at the economies of scale, you agree that 5 cedis is enough. Prisoners, are fed on 60 Ghana pesos per meal, so that's 1 cedi 80 pesos for a day. But let's look at another issue. So, from all that you have said, you're just telling us that this would not be enough to provide you all the 3 meals as though we were in normal times, we are in abnormal times, and so we have to make do with what we are being given.
Exactly, my point. Because and for many of these people, I don't think they eat 3 times a day. Besides, we are in abnormal times, and therefore, a good meal a day, in my view, will take you out of starvation, will take you out of certain social vices. It's a very good start. It's a short period. I don't think this will linger on.
But we're talking about it being a short period, Professor Peter Quartey. We don't really know how long it's going to last. In some countries, it's been there for about 60 to 70 days. It's been in our country less than 30 days. We don't know how long it's going to go on in this country. So we shouldn't be, at this point, anticipating a short period, should we?
Well, I think we'll cross the bridge as we come there. But for now, based on the information, it's only the president who can tell whether this is going to be extended or not extended. But based on the available information, let's work with the 2 weeks. If it's going to be extended, I believe that we'll come back again and provide additional funding to continue the whole process.
Okay, so let's look at the data element that you talk about, because you are also the director of the Institute of Social, Statistical and Economic Research of the University of Ghana. So we know from the 2017 Ghana Living Standard Survey that the population of persons living in, within the poverty bracket is 23% of the Ghanaian population. We're looking at between 7 million and thereabout. Now, we are feeding 1 million out of the 7 million. Shouldn't we be looking at getting to every Ghanaian who falls within the poverty bracket? Professor Quartey.
Yes, I noticed you're struggling with our name. It's a long one, but it's the Institute for Statistical, Social and Economic Research. Yes, you're not the only one. Back to the point. Yes, we have 7 million Ghanaians who are poor. But then this program is dealing with the areas that are locked down, in the lockdown situation. So let's focus on that. Of course, we are told the LEAP program is still continuing. So those who benefit from LEAP will continue to benefit from LEAP. So those in other areas that have not been locked down, but they qualify to be supported, will be supported. But now it's just those within the lockdown areas that are being considered. Those outside the lockdown areas can go and I think their daily activities and from living.
Great. So you're making a point about taking advantage of this, particular situation to also compile a data, an indication that we probably might be struggling with knowing the exact number of persons who are living within the poverty bracket.
Yes, we are. I mean, even if you look at the way this is being done, I mean, once the food arrives, see people come, rush. I'm equally even concerned about social distance in the way these things are done. If we have compiled data, people know that, look, I don't have to even rush to get my allocation. It will be organized in a much more decent manner, and then we respect the social distancing protocol. So we need to collect data, some basic information about the beneficiaries. So it will help you to plan. This is certainly going to help you to plan. Otherwise, each and every day we'll go out there with larger numbers, and we'll come back and we have to. But I don't think it will. It's clearly the best way to go. So we should take advantage of this and register. Besides, there are some areas or some people who live in middle-income localities, and they might not go to queue for food, but they've lost their jobs. Both mother and father have lost their jobs. They will feel very ashamed to even go and queue for food. So we should gradually, as we enter into this process, try and pull everybody along. I don't think it's limited to the vulnerable. Of course, when you lose your job, you're also vulnerable, and that statistics has to be computed.
And in computing those statistics, Professor Peter Quartey, how easy is that going to be? Because, currently, according to the Minister in charge of Gender, Children and Social Protection, together with NADMO, they came out with 400,000 people as those who needed assistance, because they looked at the areas affected, 8 million, and they chose 5%, and the 5% was the 400,000 that were initially being fed. You've talked about persons who might have lost their jobs. So we know that in other jurisdictions, for instance, in the UK, even persons who are self-employed, who've had to, become unemployed around this period, are being given money. Are you suggesting that we should be adding these persons to those that are being fed? But how do we even get them?
In this day of technology, I believe most Ghanaians have mobile phones. We can deploy a short survey where people just go online and fill in the details. And that can then be collected according to your municipality or your district. And then that will be a process. Even if you don't feed them or you don't find the money, at least you know the numbers you are dealing with. That gives you an idea of where to look for money, how much to look for, and how to allocate the funds. But the way we are going, I think it will be difficult. You might not know the true numbers. There are some who are suffering in silence, and for how long can they continue to suffer in silence? I don't know. If you are not careful, suicide rate might go up, or crime rate might go up, or other social vices might go up. So it is better to start collecting such data sets. It won't be too difficult to do so. I mean, if the assemblies can even create something, a portal on their website, and announce in the radio stations, the TVs, the apps, that people should go online and register. I mean, we've seen that in the US and other places where people are just behind computers, filling in their details so they can benefit from unemployment benefit also. That should be the way to go.
But talking about that being the way to go, and since you are into the gathering of statistical data, it's important we understand something. So the Ghana Living Standard Service talked about 23% of Ghanaians living in poverty. This should be an estimation or an exact figure. Do we say this is the exact figure or is estimated?
Normally it's a survey. You don't can't sample the whole population. You try and survey. The country is divided into years, and data is collected. Then you try to allocate weights and try and forecast. So it's an estimate, and very close to the reality, I must say. It is not exact, but very close to the reality.
And so it could be the situation that we have more than that. It could also be the situation that we have less than that. And so you're saying we take advantage of it and actually have a national data on those who are living in poverty. You've talked about the assemblies, having to, at this point, get people to come in if they have lost their jobs. Would that be easily the same in getting to know those who live below the poverty limit?
That can help. I mean, a simple questionnaire asking people how much they earn, and they just like the Living Standard Survey. Of course, the Living Standard Survey adds a bit more, very much detail, but a very simple one-page tool can be done, a quick, like we do market survey, a quick one, just to know people what to do, how much they earn, spend, and of course, where they have lost their jobs. If they have a team, you use that as well to verify whether it's true they're actually working, paying taxes, and they've lost their jobs. So that is feasible.
So let's look at, let's still stay with issues of data, because we know that the government has allocated some 600 million Ghana cedis for small, medium enterprises, soft loans, which will be payable over 2 years. One of the things I want us to understand also is whether we have figures to indicate how this is going to impact businesses.
Again, it comes to data collection. I looked at an African country that has not done something similar. South Africa has done something similar, in addition to also looking at consumer and customer protection issues as well. But what they've done is they are a typical pick of their National Board for Small Scale Industry is compiling data. It's asking people to register. So quickly, if they started compiling that data, one, you must be a South African and should be paying taxes, and they have some key requirements for you to qualify. So quickly, that data is being compiled. I expect our National Board for Small Scale Industries also has a portal for registering businesses, but I don't think we have activated that, deployed that to the general public in this COVID era. I mean, quickly, this is not something you waste time. As soon as the president gave the directive to start collecting data, getting people to register. Once we do that, then we will have the numbers of firms who actually need this support, and then you take it from there.
Okay, because, I mean, talking about once you register, the challenge here is that not so long ago, the Registrar General's Department came out, Professor Quarty, and talked about how out of the over 700,000 entities that have been registered, only 70,000 of them file annual returns, or 70,000 of them are operational. Now, somewhere in 2015, a research indicated that losses that the country incurred as a result of non-filing of tax returns amounted to 25 billion Ghana cedis. That would give you an idea of Ghanaian companies that truly have records to indicate that, okay, this is how much I earn and this is how much I have lost over the period. How easy would it be to get this data, particularly when many of us, SMEs, do not have them readily available?
Yeah, so thank you for this point you've raised. It's very useful. I think that would allow people to take advantage. Now, if you don't file taxes, you don't, you've registered, you don't do the needful, and you complete the form, then but you don't qualify. That should be a lesson to Ghanaian businesses. I think it's about time we move away from this informality, people not respecting the country's laws, and there is lack of enforcement. If we put this in place and ensure that it's only those that file their returns, those that have filed their returns, those that have paid, those pay taxes, benefit. Next time around, find businesses taking, doing what is required. And in the South African case I mentioned, it is clearly stated you must have filed your tax return. You must be paying taxes. Otherwise, who should pay taxes for you to benefit from such bailout? I think we need to move away from that. So for me, it is a great opportunity for the country to ensure that people register, people do the needful, we file our tax returns, and then when it comes to benefiting, we benefit.
Yeah, but President, so you're saying that if you do not file your tax returns, you should not benefit from this funds that have been made available to SMEs?
It's just like banking or any other rule in this country. If you break the rule, should we allow you to go scot-free? Should we say because of COVID, if in this COVID era, if you are driving recklessly or you are organizing a party, should we allow you to go scot-free? Similarly, if you're supposed to file your returns and you haven't done so, I don't think you should benefit. Maybe we can say not 20, the latest one, but at least you should have filed that of 2018, to be a bit broad, but not to have filed any tax returns or any at all. In my view, shouldn't qualify you to benefit from any relief.
But we also know that the informal sector within the Ghanaian economy constitutes about 80%, and many of these persons are not registered. So realistically, aren't we going to make sure that a lot of people suffer just because they are within the informal sector, Professor Quarty?
Yeah, the informal sector, you can treat them differently. They are different. But we're talking of formal sector employers or jobs or companies that do not file their taxes. As for informal sector businesses, the table of the micro firms, you can have a special package for them. That is different. But you're talking of companies, firms that want to tap into loans. If they don't file their tax returns, how do you assess whether they can repay? They pay money. It is money, people's taxes that are being given to them on special conditions. Deferred payment deferred first payment and deferred principal payment in 2 years' time.
Sure.
Come 2 years, this money would have to be paid. If you don't file your tax returns, how would I know that you are credit ready? How would I know that what you say you're doing, you're actually doing that? How would I know that if we give you this loan, you will not divert the loan in something else and lose the whole capital? So I think the filing of tax returns is a check. It's one of the basic things you have to do when you are granting loans. I don't think it's free money. If we want to give free money, give handouts, just like we are giving with the food, that's different. You don't have to register or do anything with the tax authority. But when it comes to assessing loan, whether interest-free or not, you need to have some basic information.
So talking about the informal sector and that special package which you think we should be having for them, what should that special package be and what should it entail?
Some will entail a tax relief for it could be indirect taxes or some of the inputs that they use. It could also provide, again, some form of loans, but you get them to register. If you want to deal with them, you get them to register. Then you can deal with the association. It's not going to be money. So for such informal businesses, small-scale businesses like the seamstress, the tailors, the bread makers, the bakers, all of those people would have to belong to an association. Then you can deal with the association, the leadership, and ensure that whatever you give to them is, if it's free, that's different. But if you have to repay, then they have to belong to an association. So that peer pressure, you can collect your money. They can also apply peer pressure to get them to pay their loans come the moratorium period, end of the moratorium period.
Yes, but Professor Peter Quartey, so you're talking about the need to be registered. Truth is, not everybody is registered. There are people who work in isolation. Of course, we do know that the tailors have associations and all of that, but a lot of the bakers do not have associations. There are some people who work independently of any association, and we have many of them scattered across the country. And these persons also constitute a large number of, the employees within the sector. In fact, if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service, when they go around the population and housing census, in many of the data that they present, workers within the informal sector, which add up to make the unemployment rate in Ghana around the 5 to 11%, is so huge. They constitute, in some instances, about 80% of the workforce in these districts. And these persons have no associations. So if we have to use associations, Professor Peter Quartey, aren't we going to leave a lot of people behind?
Well, quite a number of them are registered. They belong to groups, they belong to associations. Those who don't belong to such association can be asked to mobilize, belong to one. Again, the data collection issue, back to my data point, that if you provide a portal for them to register, then you can identify them into identifiable groups. You see, lending is such a way that if you lend to groups, your chances are that you can get your money back. Chances are that the monies will be used or be given to that actually deserve the money. Otherwise, if you lend to people, we have a poor addressing system, and so businesses fold every now and then basically just put your money out there without recourse to a repayment plan. So I believe for those who are registered, yes, it's easy to do. Those that are not registered, get a portal, get them to register, put them into groups, get some leadership. You need to streamline the operations so you can lend to them. But lending to them in a vacuum will not work. Giving them cash handouts is just like giving them fish rather than teaching them how to fish.
And so if we, giving them cash, we need to know their needs. And we've also talked about how we have unavailability of data. That in itself means that we cannot know their needs because we don't have data readily available to show that this is what they generate and this is what they'll be losing. So under the circumstances, how would we be able to assess them and thus assist them?
You see, South Africa is doing what I've suggested. They are registering them. They call it small business loans. They are giving them small business loans. So they have provided a portal and they are being registered. And that's exactly, luckily for us, we have a decentralized system. We have the district assemblies. They can, yeah, depending on which district you operate in, you log into a portal and register. That it will be easier for them to track you, for them to know what exactly you are doing, for them to know what your needs are. We have Association of Ghana Industries. We have, all forms of business associations. And help. It can also help us. It can advise us as to how we deal with these groups.
So let's look at still stay with the data issue. It's become very important because all the things we're talking about has come back to the data affair. So if we have all these data issues and yet we have allocated 600 million Ghana cedis to support SMEs, how would we be able to know if this amount of money is enough for the SMEs and the challenges they're going through?
From what I heard from they did some consultation with the business association. So roughly, it will not be enough. I don't think this will be enough, but at least it's something to cushion them, to get them going. As we move along, I believe as more funds become available, government in its wisdom finds money for them. But again, the National Board for Small Scale Industries, if you check their website, you'll find that they already have a portal for registering businesses. So I believe individuals or firms that are interested in tapping into this money should start registering them, so that when they are ready to take off, it becomes easier for them to access funds.
Talking about it not being enough, and I've heard you say this over and over again, that the funds that we have readily available can never be enough. And I remember speaking to former Minister of Finance, Seth Terkper, right here, and he talked about one thing. He talked about the fact that when, for instance, in 2014, 2015, fuel prices reduced drastically on the world market compared to what we had benchmarked, what they did was to reduce a lot of the capital expenditure. Now, we've talked about borrowing some 11.4 billion Ghana cedis, even though we've said it's also going to cost us 9.5 billion. We have also decided, Professor Peter Quartey, to also ensure that we reduce the cap of the stabilization fund, and have thus reduced also the capital expenditure by 1.2 billion Ghana cedis, together with goods and services. Shouldn't we be looking at this moment of reducing further our capital expenditure so that we could use these funds to assist a lot of the businesses who, when we are done with coronavirus, can then survive and propel the country's economy?
We could that, it's very typical of us. Anytime we face challenges, capital expenditure is the first to suffer. We cut capital expenditure. There are some critical roads or critical investments that we need to undertake. There are some that have been started, and therefore, if we should leave them and come back later, we might perhaps start the whole process again. After the rains, a lot of the drainage and other things that were uncompleted will be washed away. A lot of the topsoil will be gone. So I think there should be some assessment of some of the capital expenditure projects that are already ongoing, those that can continue, and those that perhaps we can defer to a later date, so that when we are out of the woods, we can get back to business and fix them. We are in desperate times, and therefore certain things will have to, if need be.
So you agree that we should be looking at cutting, reducing our capital expenditure?
Yes, I agree, but not doing that without recourse to assessing which ones need to be suspended, which ones need to continue. We shouldn't just cut it for cutting's sake, but I think a good assessment of where we are with some of the capital projects, and see which ones we can, if we suspend, will not cost us so much, and then we can always get back to business. And which ones, if we do suspend, would have challenges. Once we do that quick evaluation, we'll have the exact numbers to how low we can go with our capital expenditure.
But you would also agree, Professor Peter Korte, that if we, for instance, decide to look at it and say, oh, we're maintaining some of them, what it then means around this time when we're talking about, a reduced revenue mobilization or revenue generation, it means we're borrowing, and now we are being told that, our primary balance will be getting into deficit, so we'll be having a primary deficit, and no longer the primary surplus that we had touted so much. Isn't that leading us to, debt unsustainability moments, which in the long run could seriously affect the Ghanaian economy negatively?
Yeah, some of the capital projects we borrowed are financed from external sources. So the loans have been sourced already. And for those ones, we can go ahead and implement because the agreements have been signed and the funds are going to flow in. So that shouldn't be a problem. Borrowing, yes, you have to borrow and stay within sustainable levels. But in desperate times, sometimes you push the threshold a little bit, or at least stay at the margin as much as possible, because it's better to still stay healthy, it's better to stay alive and have your debt level increase than to have a greater proportion of your population die of COVID-19. As for the economy, as the president said, we can always bring back the economy, but we cannot bring back lives.
Yeah, but while we can always bring back the economy also, the timing that we need to bring back the economy is very, very important. And we know, for instance, that in the Western world, it actually took them about 2 to 3 years to get out of recession of 2007. And so if we're looking at this and we're saying that we're getting to debt unsustainability limits, how sure are we that, come 2021, we'll be able to get out of the woods and immediately transform that year, Professor Korte?
Yeah, so it depends on how we manage this crisis period. You see, that's why countries have provided bailout funds, try to inject capital into the system. It depends on where you put your money. If you put your money into highly productive areas, then you are very likely to record very significant growth rates. And as soon as you get out of this process, you're able to bring back the economy. So we need to put our monies into highly productive areas. Apart from supporting people, the vulnerable and the rest, we need to also, so for instance, the loans that we are giving to SMEs, we should give to viable SMEs that will produce to sustain the growth momentum.
When you talk about highly productive areas, what are those highly productive areas that you would want us investing in, Professor Korte?
Agri processing, for instance, is one key area. You see that some of the agriculture imports, some of the food imports will not come in. So if there are firms that are producing, let's say, rice, or there are firms that are producing for local consumption, there are firms that are adding value, that are processing for possible exports, I think, or firms that are producing to replace imports, or we term import substitutes. These are companies that we should support. The pharmaceutical industry, for instance, we import a lot of the PPEs. If there are companies that are going to produce nose masks, if there's a company that can produce locally manufactured ventilator, if there's a company that can produce certain drugs, we are told hydroxychloroquine and other things can also be used to manage COVID. I mean, these are some of the things that we can support firms to go into, and I believe this will generate some output and revenue for the country.
So finally, I mean, all the things you've talked about, I mean, these are things you expect that we do, but from the plan that has been presented so far, apart from persons being assisted to produce nose masks and all of those things, the other areas that you've talked about are not ones that have been captured, Professor Korte.
Yes, I think so far we haven't looked at people who have lost their jobs There are people working in banks who have lost their jobs in the process. There are others working in other areas. I always talk about the education sector. We have a number of private school teachers who either lost their jobs or in the process of losing their jobs and would not, their livelihood are threatened. We need to look into it. That's why I said, let's compile the data so that we know exactly what we're dealing with, and then we're able to move everybody along. So far, the initiatives are good, but I think as we move along, we try to pull everybody along, and then we get out of this pandemic as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Professor Peter Quartey, for joining us. Professor Peter Quartey is Director of the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research of the University of Ghana. That will be all from us this evening on Upfront. My name is Winston. I'm on behalf of the team. We're grateful that you joined us. Up next is JoyNews Prime. Have a lovely evening.